Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Scale series where we're talking about scaling companies with founders who have actually scaled companies to amazing levels of success. With us on the line today in the hot seat is Andrew Chrostowski, the CEO of RealWear. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
So why don't you kick us off, Andrew, and give our viewers around the world the elevator pitch about you and what you guys are up to at RealWear.
Well, starting with RealWear, the most important part first, we are the world's leading industrial wearable computer that's used as a complete voice control system. So the right way to think about our product, think of a tablet computer in a form factor where the camera is facing forward to give the other users the view of what you're working on. The display is now a micro display that goes to either your left or right eye. All the touch and gesture that you'd use on a tablet computer is now voice controlled in 105 decibel environment. So you can operate this next to a train, next to a paver, next to industrial equipment. And then all of that then answers the question of like what you can do with this device is, connect that remote worker. I'm chairman and CEO of the company. I've been in that role since March of 2020. I've actually been with the company almost from the beginning, first as an advisor and chairman of the advisory board, and then later as an investor. Right after the Series A became the chief operating officer for about a year to get the systems of the business settled in and get us set up to scale. As you probably know, hardware business is very hard to scale, and when you're going to double every quarter, it's not like a software business where you can really do that virtually with no additional effort. We had to do that as a hardware company, so that was something I oversaw as a COO back in 2018 before going back to my advisory role. So that's kind of my background with the company and what RealWear really does, which is engage, empower, and elevate those frontline workers.
So who are your customers typically?
Our customers are virtually, we have literally thousands of customers, 5,000 customers worldwide. We have 41 of the Fortune 100 customers are our customers. So we're really the blue chip of the blue chip customers here. Your listeners may be interested to know that every Ford dealership in the United States has a RealWear device in it today to help them diagnose vehicles and be able to turn them around with the assistance of the Technical Assistance Center in Detroit. So it's something that's reaching scale now across a number of industries.
Andrew, what's the problem that you guys solve in a tweet, would you say?
We solve the problem, what I would say, as being that knowledge transfer platform that addresses the gap in the skilled workers that we have today. So, everyone understood what happened during COVID is not enough skilled workers to do everything from restaurant jobs to engineering jobs to whatever. Those companies that think that is a thing that's going to get better over time are mistaken. This is a demographic problem that is going to persist well into the years ahead and decades ahead. And so the way you address that as a business is either to automate people out of your system so that you don't depend on those skilled workers, or you actually, on a very human-centric technology point of view, augment their abilities to be able to move more quickly up the learning curve, be able to execute their work more safely, more productively. And so that is the approach that RealWear has taken. And frankly, even if you're a pro automation person, which of course I am as well, we're decades away from the robots fixing the robots in the dark. So we solve the problem of being able to empower frontline workers to access information, collaborate seamlessly, to be able to connect to all of that value of the IoT and artificial intelligence and machine learning out in the cloud, and bring that right down to them where they're able to take action on it right away in their daily work, and therefore be able to work more effectively. So we solve that problem for not only how people can work where they are and where they are better, but be able to do it in industries as broadly as an operating room for a surgeon, to someone on a manufacturing line, to someone in a service bay, to someone out doing service calls on the rooftop. So it's literally multiple industries all facing the same issue of frontline professionals needing to work like we work every day, being connected workers with our laptops and phones, et cetera.
Andrew, I agree with you when you said, like scaling hardware, it's like another monster. It's not like software, which is much, much easier to scale. How big are you guys when we talk about scale? What kind of scale are you guys at for our viewers?
Well, from an organization point of view, we're quite modest. We're about 100 people, globally. Actually, more global customers than not global or employees. And in terms of sales, last year, we are in the middle of. I have to be a little bit careful because we're in the middle of going public right now, Matt. And so there is filings for the SEC that I can't share more than what's out there. But so I think I'll just say that we've your audience is interested, they can go check out our filing on the SEC website. But we have been growing. We've enjoyed significant growth during the COVID period, and we're seeing that now again taking off with the interest in, as I said, all of the benefits of remote work now that people have embraced.
So that's exciting, going public. What are you excited about going public? Where's your head at currently with the listing?
Well, so we're doing it through a merger activity with Cascadia Acquisition Corporation. So we're in the middle of that process. We haven't filed the S4 yet, but that's coming up soon. And so I always like to say that in the public markets, and your viewers will know too, that right now the public markets are in a lot of turmoil. So it's an exciting time, but the deal's not done until the deal's done. But what it does, why I'm excited about it, is it just moves RealWear into a different conversation, relative to all of our large public customers. As I said, we've got 41 of the Fortune 100. We've got probably 200 of the global 2,000 as customers. We've deployed nearly 80,000 units worldwide. So there's a lot of users out there, and when you're a public company, you get the benefit of people really understanding that we've reached a transition point in wearable computing, that it's no longer just sort of people waiting for it to happen. There's a lot of dialogue today about the demise of the final demise of Google Glass and sort of what's going on with HoloLens, and of course everyone's talking about the Apple are they going to go into this virtual reality where all these things are kind of in flux, but what's not in flux is the idea that day in and day out more workers worldwide are putting on wearable computers like our Navigator 520 and going out and doing real work and adding value to that. And I think that question has now gone away, that people really, and the more people understand that we've reached that point, the faster we're going to reach the inflection of scaling, to go to hyperscale, frankly.
So Andrew, is the IPO, is it a vehicle for you to scale further? Is it a reputational thing? Is it a way to unlock public market capital? Like, what's factoring into your decision making there?
Yes, and yes. It's exactly that. You get the advantages right away of being a public company. You get the immediate advantage of those earnings calls, right? That people pay attention. The analysts who are going to take a look at you. We've got public company comparisons in Vuzix, so people know Vuzix is a public company. People can look and see their performance versus our own in this regard. So we know that that's going to give us great visibility, right, in terms of what we're doing, and people can see the value that we're creating, and that builds its own level of reaching new audiences, right? People who aren't today listening are going to listen to you because maybe as a private company, maybe not so exciting, but now as a public company with public company comparables and great partners like Microsoft and Zoom and Cisco and TeamViewer and all the ones that are part of our ecosystem of partners know that, okay, you guys are here and you're here to stay. So that's important. So there's a lot of visibility that's going to come with that. There'll also be, as you pointed out, scale, because once you become public, the ability to attract additional capital becomes much easier in the process. And so I think that enables you to fuel the engine to drive innovation, growth, and scale. And then I think the third thing that you talked about in terms of just being able to have a mechanism by which you can bolt on other companies. It's like it's much easier once you have a public currency, a public stock, to be able to do transactions where you can find the right fits and put them together. So that's why I said yes, yes, and yes to your points of view. It really advances this on all fronts to scale.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, what's the secret to scaling a hardware, company like you guys? Because I've met loads of startup founders who really struggle with scaling hardware-based operating models. It's a lot of the time it's being made out in China or other markets. Then there's a shortage of silicon conductors, and then they can't do X, and then there's a production run issue, and then that you know what I mean. So it seems to me like there's a secret there, and I'm curious to know what has led to RealWear's ability to scale something which I believe is still at the apex of difficulty when it comes to scaling companies.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think that the short answer to your question is discipline management, but really sales and operations planning. And that's something I've been doing in Fortune 500 companies for my whole career, where I've done it multiple times. We really look at, understanding the actual source of demand that you're working with. What is the demand, not only today, but as you're looking forward through your decision horizon? And most startups just have too short a decision horizon that they think about. So in software, you don't pay a big penalty for that. In hardware, you pay a huge penalty, right? When you don't understand the dynamics of your supply chain. So first of all, it's understanding what is my demand profile looking like? And then the second thing is to look at how is your supply profile addressing that, right? And ultimately understanding that sales and the sales are a result of demand and supply equalizing, and that's going to drive your financials. And so you build, and I built all of RealWear around this process of sales and operation planning on a regular basis, constantly looking at these things every 2 weeks and managing forward. And then what you do is you add the risk management piece of this to really understand the dynamics of your supply chain, so you can figure out where do you need to de-risk certain applications, buy certain components in advance. How do you build certain things to finished goods inventory? Where do you stage that inventory, right, to have availability? And it doesn't hurt. Like during COVID, we launched the Navigator 500 platform at the height of COVID. We were working through this process, and where everybody else was running out of chips and having all kinds of issues, it didn't hurt for us to have Qualcomm as a lead investor in our Series B and C that allowed us to be able to go to them and say, hey, look, we need some Snapdragons for our new platform, making sure that we got those, right? So you have the right partnerships. You think about how you scale operations. We use a third-party manufacturer that then can help us manage that process. And so we can add and subtract labor as we need to accelerate builds or hold them back. And that allows us to manage cash flow in a very intelligent way so that we don't have excessive burn or excessive inventory through the process. So that's probably a long-winded answer to say it's about discipline management. And S&OP is something that most startups don't think about, but if you're a hardware startup, you have to.
Mm. Where does discipline management go wrong in your experience, Andrew?
Short-sightedness, I think, because there's a difference between being focused entirely on a process, right? So you can follow a given process and lose sight of what's happening to the outside environments, right? So it's always, you've got to be sensitive to the customer. You've got to be, sensitive to the marketing or market environment that you're facing, right? A lot of RealWear's, my whole tenure as CEO of RealWear has been, COVID and post-COVID. I took over in March of 2020, right? So literally I had one meeting in person with my exec staff in 2020, and the rest of the whole year was built virtually, right, in terms of doing what we're doing here on a Zoom call, for instance. So it really is where people go wrong is just getting locked into process and missing sort of those outside. I would say the focus is down and in. So discipline can imply that you're focused down and in the organization, and that's very important. But the executive team, once you've established the disciplines at the operating level for down and in, at the sales and at the executive level, you have to be up and out. You have to be looking at what's happening in the environment with the customers, with the demand. And so I think people take that discipline management approach and go down and in, and that's when you get blindsided.
Andrew, what are you struggling with now in the context of scaling RealWear and taking it to that next plateau, if you like?
I think the same thing that almost any company that is at our level of maturity, which is just reaching enough people to let them know where we really are, where the market has evolved. There's been so many disappointments in, I'll say, this XR space, right? And I've been to all of the shows over the years, and you follow all of the activity, and of course a lot hinges on what's happened with things like Magic Leap, where there was a lot of hype and then a lot of disappointments, and there was a lot of activity with Google Glass, and ultimately starts and stops with that. So this industry has been just met with a number of companies that have come, made promises, underperformed, moved on. And so I think that level of disappointment, we've kind of created a bunch of jaded partners out there who look at this ecosystem and say, is it really here yet? And RealWear's performance demonstrates that it is here, right? If you have the right focus, right? We aren't focused on the consumer space. We're focused entirely on that industrial frontline professional who has real challenges today, and then we provide real solutions to. And I think that that's the difference here. It's just been too broadly described as like sort of the hand wave of what this XR experience can do for everyone, when in fact there hasn't been enough XR software and solutions to really close the gap. I would make an analogy to sort of having that 4K television when there's no 4K content, or taking it back to my childhood, right? Having color television being in your living room, but none of the networks are doing color broadcasts yet, right? And so there's been a little bit of that suffering of like the technology is kind of here. There's some doubt about users who have it, and we've now demonstrating that it's really there, and you focus on that. And that's, I think, the key to success and scale.
You mentioned reach just now, Andrew, and also yours, excuse me, you've also mentioned, you have these Fortune, top 200, Fortune 5,000 companies, all these amazing clients in your portfolio and stuff like this. I think it's something that I think we all aspire to, don't we? We want this portfolio of better clients than everybody else. And I do think that, having the narrative around your client portfolio in the context of scale is really important. Like, Apple's my client is a great thing. I wish we could all say. So how have you guys been able to build that portfolio of clients that are who they are? Like, what would you put that down to? Is it, again, operations, or is it slightly different because you are in the hardware space?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, Matt. And I think it comes down to vision, right? So as you start off, as you start the vision of the company, understand, who are my customers going to be here, right? And again, a lot of our competitors really focus on that consumer space where someone at an individual level is making a decision. We recognized earlier our focus was going to be that industrial frontline professional, and they were going to be part of a larger organization. And so even when we launched our first product, right, we knew that we had to have certifications to operate the device, where our customers were going to be operating. So it was great that Colgate-Palmolive loved our product in upstate New York, but they're going to turn around and say, hey, I want to use it in Mexico, and I want to use it in our plant in Singapore. And you say, sorry, you can't do that. We're not certified there. So as a startup, we launched our first product certified in 50 countries. And now we're certified in many, many more as our customers operate. So one, we knew that we understood our customers were going to need to be able to use it where they were going to be. Secondly, we knew we had to scale, reach these customers. If you think of trying to sell hardware direct to these large global customers, it can take you 6 months to negotiate a supply agreement with somebody the size of Pepsi or somebody the size of Ford, versus saying, I'm going to work through a two-tier distribution model where my distributors and resellers already have relationships with these large companies. And so the conversation is really only about, how do you want to, you want to purchase our device? Well, how do you buy your laptops and your tablets today? Oh, we buy them this way. Well, they're a partner, buy it through them, right? So you scale by using your partners to not only deal with the front end customer side from a reseller point of view, but from the distributor side. And then you reach out proactively, and this took years of work on RealWear's part, from the very founding of our executive team, making executive contacts at levels of Cisco and Microsoft and Zoom and all of these partners, and now these nearly 200 enterprise partners that we have that developing software. And you make sure that they understand your value proposition. You bring them into the to the conversations early, and you just keep working it. It is hard. I can tell you that a lot of hours went into work to get Microsoft to develop Microsoft Teams specifically for our RealWear Navigator platform, right? And we're the only Android device that they've really done that optimization for in a wearable. So it's pretty exciting, but it's hard work, and it's really having that vision that you need those partners to transform the world. If you think about how this goes, if you go to an ExxonMobil and they say, oh, we're a Zoom-based company. They do their collaboration globally through Zoom. But you say, well, I've got this solution here that's not Zoom, but you can use this for frontline workers. Well, intrinsically, right, suddenly those workers are not connected to the whole rest of ExxonMobil's experience. So if you're going to solve their problem, you've got to be able to provide that experience across them. The customer's going to decide which of these remote expert collaboration solutions work for them. And so you build those relationships around that. And then you go deep with some of the smaller scale customers who have great solutions that go beyond the remote expert, right, to workflows and to other document control systems, to warehouse picking. Partners like TeamViewer come to mind that do such a great job in this regard. So it's thinking ahead right away that you're going to work with partners and build that ecosystem as a strategic imperative.
Mm. Yeah, it's a great point. The other thing I'm hearing is that it's also about leverage. So the reason why you go through indirect sales channels really is because of leverage. Like you're leveraging 1,000 relationships in one conversation. So in other words, you take your product to a distributor who focuses on Asia Pac or whatever the case is, and you go, hey, we're RealWear, we do this thing for this customer, blah, blah, blah. It complements your portfolio. We could add value to your company as a distribution company. They have 1,000 implementers or resellers, just exactly what Microsoft does and Oracle and these guys. And so you sell once, but you get 1,000 times the leverage. That's really what I'm hearing from you.
Right. And I think you're exactly right. The only caveat I would say is that model works extremely well when it's a very well understood, commoditized kind of solution, like when we're talking about standardized software or laptops, PCs, tablets, phones. People kind of know what this stuff is. We're still relatively nascent as a wearable industry. And so even though we have all that great leverage, everything you just described is exactly true. There's still a lot of work that we do working and partnering with them to tell the story to the end user, right? So we kind of help. So we're kind of doing both things in parallels. We're constantly out at trade shows, making those contacts, helping people understand, then going to customers and potentially going in together with a reseller, for instance, to help them understand the opportunities. And so there's a lot of yes and that goes with this kind of scale, but ultimately it's a snowball, and as it begins to roll, and more people understand this kinds of solutions are available, all of that leverage from that two-tier distribution just kicks in just as you described. But there's still a lot of individual evangelization that goes on relative to wearable technology today. And so we have a great talented team of sales professionals and account executives that do nothing but help our end user customers appreciate that and then connect them to that network of resellers and distributors to close the loop.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, you mentioned you kind of came in as a COO and then you were promoted to CEO. It's an interesting journey that you've been on. So now as CEO, what role does the CEO play in terms of your next evolution of scale? So let me unpack that because it's a big one. So the idea is that people buy the person, like the top of the company, like, Steve Jobs, and then pick your CEO of these big companies, where you're buying Elon Musk. Like I buy Tesla, but I'm also buying Elon Musk. I buy RealWear, but I'm also buying Andrew. Do you know what I mean? So is that a truism from your perspective in the context of scale, the role of the CEO? And because remember, if I was a distribution, if I am let's just say a customer sitting in Brazil or wherever, and I see RealWear, I don't know who Andrew is. I'm looking at RealWear. So the context is very different. However, if you're doing an IPO, I really want to know who the CEO is, right? And what his thesis is for the next evolution of the company and things like that. So where does this role of the CEO play out in terms of the influence that individual has on the ability of the company to scale or not?
Yeah, this is a very deep question that I think reasonable people may differ on, but this is the way I see it. There are exceptional individuals in the world. Elon Musk, one of my heroes in terms of that. You look at Bill Gates, you look at others, and Steve Jobs. And by the way, you get those folks, and they have transformative value on industries and multiple industries in some cases. They also come with a lot of baggage, right? That sometimes is negative in terms of what really affects the organization. Leadership I've been a student of leadership since my early days in the Air Force, and as a cadet, and then as a serving officer for 10 years, and all of the industrial work I've done. And what I've learned in terms of looking at leadership in an industrial context is I'm all about superior, sustainable performance, right? We want to build a business that's solid, sustainable, and will continue on. And so if you have that mindset, you take the hero CEO role out for a moment, right? And put yourself in the role of an investor, put yourself in the role of a customer, and you say, I want a business I can depend on. I want a business that's real and that can weather the bumps and storms that happen, whether it's COVID or technological innovations or what have you. And that's the approach I take. So I would never compare myself to these charismatic CEOs that have changed the world. But what I do take pride in is creating a team of individuals who have created a business that is going to be able to succeed with or without me in the future, right? That's what an investor cares about. They want to know that the systems are in place, the leadership succession's in place, that the vision and the mission are clear, and all those things, all those intangibles are in place. The culture of the organization is set. And so when I look at, my role first being, as I said, advisory board chairman, investor, COO, then chairman of the company, and then ultimately CEO, my role has been to create those conditions for success. So focusing on culture, right? Making sure we have a positive and inclusive culture in the company that's really, focused on the things that we do. In fact, we call our culture Be Real, right? So everybody in our organization knows that to be a RealWear employee means to be bold, right? That we do things and we act with boldness in this environment. That we are in fact enthusiastic. That we are excited about this changing the future of work that we do together. That we are responsive to not only our customers but each other. So that's the be our part. We talk about ethics. No company can be successful long term without being completely ethical. And in doing that across the world, there are a lot of challenges that you have to work through in every different country. So we're ethical. We are authentic. We want everyone to be able to work at RealWear and be their authentic best selves, and ultimately want everyone to be learners, right? So lifelong learners in the organization. That means we keep getting better. We may make mistakes, but we're going to learn from them and move on. And so we have that culture that becomes critical. We have the discipline and the systems in place. We talked about the importance of S&OP. We haven't talked about so much of strategic planning, but that's another process that we do, which is priority deployment, which aligns the company around 5-year goals that we are able to create. And there are other systems in place in there. So my role as CEO is to make sure all of those things are in place so that the people of RealWear can excel at what they do. And if I do that job right, there may be some people who say, thanks, Andrew, for creating that situation. But it's not about having the hero CEO. It's about having the CEO that creates an ongoing superior sustainable business. And that's more of the Berkshire Hathaway, view. That's sort of like they would look at in terms of really being able to have a business that's going to stay on the big board for years to come. So that's how I would describe my role, Matt. Not so much the hero CEO that we all love to look at, but also creates a lot of risk. Look at what happened to Uber with their hero CEO, right? So we're much more about the company and the people.
Do you see that changing, like if you become or when you become a listed entity? Because I would imagine you'd have to do a number of, or with your investment banking partners, I would imagine, I don't know what you know, but I would imagine that you're doing roadshows to investors. And so you're front and center, and maybe you have some of your other C-suite leadership team there, like a product guy and what have you, to weigh in and so forth. But do you see your particular role changing now that you're looking at this next massive step, which is being a publicly listed company?
Right. So should that come to be, the biggest thing that changes for me is really in my CEO role, right? My chairman role will get to be a bit more focused on managing a public board, right? So there's more of the responsibilities that come with having a public board. And as a CEO, and I've talked to many of my public company CEO mentors and friends, and they'll all describe the fact that they've been a CEO for X number of quarters, right? So not I've been a CEO for 10 years, I've been a CEO for 40 quarters. And the reason is that just the nature of being a public company today requires you to be able to focus on short-term performance in the stock market, right? That is something that just is going to be radically different. So the focus on short-term forecasting, goal performance, and managing those expectations, that falls to the CEO. Of course, my CFO, Andrew Lee, who will be serving with us in this regard. So the role changes a lot with respect to that, right? Because investors are looking for that messaging and all the rules that go around communicating all of those things, right? So part of that says you've got the disciplines you've already put in place to run the business as the business has to be run, so you can take this more outward focused up and out role that you have to do. But you can't lose sight of the down and in stuff that you do as a leader either. So you've got to do both. So I'd say that the emphasis on those outside meetings become, hypercritical as you move into the public space if we're successful in pulling this off.
Andrew, have you thought about how much scale is enough? I mean, is there enough? Like if you're going and, publicly listing, RealWear, it's like, I would imagine, having never listed a company, but if I were, I'd be like, well, how big can we get? Do you know what I mean? Because that would be my motivation. But maybe it is a slightly different thing, because I think a lot of guys who listen to the show and who'll be following your interview and our conversation is they are never going to list. Do you know what I mean? They may never get there.
Yeah. And until we get there, we're not there either, right? So I'll grant that. Tough market conditions today, lots of things going on. And you can be successful either way. I mean, in the end, it's about, again, the best strategy any CEO can be, whether they're just starting out as they're getting their seed funding, or they're moving through their Series E or whatever. It's all about building a superior, sustainable business. If you can get to the point where you're cash flow positive and you've got disciplined path to that, or at least a disciplined path to profitability, you're going to be okay. All right, whether you stay private or not. The danger zone, right, is this, especially in today's current market, whether and raising money in the private area now is very, very tough, right? It's basically shut down. The Silicon Valley Bank incident certainly was probably another nail in the coffin of trying to raise funds in the private sector right now. So everyone has to focus on business fundamentals, making sure that your burn rate is at the right level and that you've got the ability to the runway in front of you to sustain, or you get to that profitability point where it then is an academic discussion about what's the best way to unleash value for your shareholders, which could be to be a very large private company. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I serve on the board of a private company that's now in its 5th generation of management, right? And they'll never go public, and yet they are extremely prosperous and a leader in their industry. And there's no reason that you have to. But for RealWear and this market in particular, the technology market that we're part of, we think that there is no practical limit to the scale that we can be. When you think about the size of 2 billion frontline workers is the estimate out there, right? That are today out there working with their hands in the front line, and they're not connected. And today you'd say, well, gee, I've got a workforce and my folks are working from everywhere. Maybe they're working at home 3 days a week or 5 days a week. And you'd never think about them doing that without a PC and without a tablet and without a phone, right? You'd never think you could be productive. We take that for granted in all of our hybrid workers. Well, you've got 2 billion frontline workers who are unconnected from all the value, all the information, all the collaboration, all the tools that are emerging, right, that allow people to be more productive and work more safely. That's our market. And no, we're just at a drop of a drop, in that. And so there are decades of growth ahead in this industry and virtually untapped potential to address this huge market and this need to help people work more productively and more safely.
Sign me up. I want to invest. No, that's awesome. I love the enthusiasm, and I'm even more excited about the vision in terms of like where you guys are going. I want to talk to you about you for a moment, Andrew. How have you had to evolve? Because I think one thing I know to be true, I've never listed a company or whatever, but I've certainly scaled companies. And I know what it's like to survive and then, get to some kind of level of success, whatever success means these days. But I think the premise for this question, Andrew, is a company will only scale to the extent that you do as the founder or the visionary. Increase your thinking, 10x opportunities, present themselves and so forth. So how have you had to evolve, like as a leader, to get RealWear to now become, opportunistic in the sense of this next opportunity that you're pursuing?
Yeah, I'd love to unpack some of the thoughts you just laid there. But, for me, keep in mind in my career arc, I had already operated at very, very large scale in companies like, United Technologies, Goodrich, Tyco. So, Scott Safety. So I already had very large organizations with thousands of people working for me and global footprint and all of that. So I was already, a certified, director for the National Association of Corporate Directors. So I was already managing at board level environments. I've already, had years of experience at the operating level, building and growing businesses. So in coming into RealWear, my position may be more unique than some other founders who are listening, who maybe started earlier in their career in this place and are trying to scale themselves up. I actually had to take that idea of scale and say, what's the organization capable of absorbing? Because suddenly it's like you don't have an assistant to do this and another person to do that for you. It's like suddenly you're making your travel arrangements, you're doing these things, right? And you understand the people working for you are kind of doing all this stuff and doing multiple jobs. So the idea of scale early on was don't do too much with the organization that's not ready for that. So you had to kind of, scale down what you do and the tools you can apply so that you can grow the business into that level. So I was fortunate to come in with knowing what good looked like, right? Through things like sales and operation planning and priority deployment and all of these other activities to build a vision, what it takes to grow a culture of positive, high performance organization. And so you have that vision. Now you just got to take it bite-sized to kind of get the organization to a point where they can scale. So it may be a little different from some of your listeners who may be saying, gee, I stepped into this role, I'm going to grow up and suddenly now I've got to operate for the first time at the board level. I've got to operate the first time as a CEO. In my case, it was really more about making sure the organization was ready for the challenges it was facing than anything about me per se. But that challenge for me was to again, understand what role I was playing in helping get this organization to where it's going to be. And then, I've always believed that you never let, school interfere with your education. I'm a lifelong learner. For people who follow me on LinkedIn, they see that, I typically put out these, Monday Mind Day kind of post of book reviews and things where I'm learning constantly, because the greatest leaders really embrace learning. And so for me, whether I'm learning about how to be a CEO in a startup, or I'm now talking about being a CEO in a newly public company, hopefully in the near future, those are all learning opportunities. And you take from what you know and you apply specific learning opportunities, then you execute and repeat the cycle. So I think it may be a little different here. I'm excited about every day I get up, excited about the mission of RealWear and how we're changing the future of work and what we're doing and the partners we get to work with and the customers whose businesses we're changing. I don't think any startup anywhere in the world has had more disproportionate impact, for instance, on ESG than RealWear, because there are literally tens of thousands of people who are not getting on airplanes and flying to go solve a problem, when today they can operate, someone at the other end can turn on their navigator and connect with someone across the world and solve a problem. And that kind of reducing carbon footprints and reducing expenses is something we do every day. So it's kind of exciting to see, what we're doing and how we're making an impact.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, if you could get into the Matt Brown Show time machine and go back to yourself, day one, before, doing what you're doing now, what advice would you give yourself about scaling RealWear?
I would, let's say, scaling any business, right? I think that the most important aspect, if you haven't seen it before, you need to have great mentors who have seen it, right? Because scale is achieving scale is hard in and of itself. And if you're hardware versus software, I think you have to almost separate those two conversations about, are you building a software business? Are you building a hardware business? And RealWear, we began as a hardware business building, device to create the market. And then now we've gone to the data side of those things. So we've now connected that with RealWear Cloud and RealWear Connect and all of the things that we're doing now with the RealWear Marketplace that provides all of these software partnerships and our own cloud solutions, and then connecting to those systems of record, right? That strategy of knowing that that's where you're going guided a lot of what we did. So as a solution company, but if you're starting out by scale, you got to understand it's what are the limitations? What are the limitations of your team? And ultimately, it's about people. I mean, you can focus. Scale is not just about the mechanics, the down and in part we were talking about, right? It's about the team that you've built around yourself. Who have you attracted? And RealWear was blessed not only in its original founders, who came in with great global experience and knowledge, but also a lot of the folks we hired who came in with that passion around that and experience base is allowed to do that. So even if you're a CEO that maybe not so experienced, don't be afraid to surround yourself with people with that experience so that you have the conditions for success set right from the beginning.
Yeah, I love that idea of the conditions for success, because success is not, it's a product of the environment, isn't it? And many other things, but it's really around, well, what conditions make up the propensity of a business to scale. So that's kind of what I'm resonating with right now. Andrew, thank you for being on the Secrets of Scale series. Super excited about where you guys are going. If there's 2 billion people on the front line there that aren't doing what they could, that's an exciting opportunity. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Matt. Pleasure being here.
Anytime.